Welcome to our Parent Literacy Information session for Devon Meadows Primary School. For those that couldn't attend in person, we will run through the slides here with you now, and if you've got any questions, please get in touch with your classroom teacher or Ellen Cake, the literacy leader and learning specialist at Devon Meadows Primary School. So welcome to everyone. Today we're going to go through literacy and how it's taught at Devon Meadows Primary School and some new approaches that we've embedded here, and give you some tips and resources to support your children's literacy education at home. The first thing, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we work, the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respect to elders past and present. I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in our organisations and communities. So today we're hoping that by the end of our session, you'll have developed an understanding of the new changes at Devon Meadows and how literacy is taught in our classrooms, that you will learn what synthetic systematic phonics is and why we are teaching it, and you'll have some strategies and resources to support your child's literacy learning at home. So we're going to start off with a little video that will explain what synthetic systematic phonics is and why we are teaching it at Devon Meadows.
What exactly is systematic synthetic phonics? When we learn the alphabet, we usually learn the letter names A, B, C, and so on. When we learn to read and spell, we need to know the speech sounds that the letters represent. For example, dog is made up of 3 speech sounds, D, O, G, blended together to make dog. Blending from left to right is a critical synthetic phonics skill. When we write the word dog, we need to recall the individual speech sounds that make up the word. This is known as segmenting. We need to recall each of the letters that represent those speech sounds to be able to write the word. Explicit teaching of segmenting and blending is essential to a synthetic phonics approach. English is made up of about 44 speech sounds, and we only have 26 letters of the alphabet to represent them. This means that we combine letters in more than 200 ways to represent speech sounds. Synthetic phonics does not mean fake words. It means phonic knowledge is built from simple to complex. For example, students are taught that the phonemes can be written as sip, grass, house, and later scent, voice, castle, science, and psychic, and the graphemes can represent s, z, sh, or zh in words. Decodable Readers allows students to practice the phonic knowledge they have learned. Synthetic phonics is evidence-based instruction that benefits all students, but particularly those from disadvantaged families, students with learning difficulties, and students learning English as a second language. It is most effective as part of a well-developed, comprehensive literacy program.
Excellent. So, as some of you may be aware, Devon Meadows has introduced a systematic synthetic phonics program called PLD, which stands for Promoting Literacy Development. It is a Western Australian literacy program, and it was developed by speech therapists, occupational therapists, and psychologists to best support students' literacy skills. And the reason we've picked this is because it isn't just about phonics. It does now enable us to support our students' reading, their oral language skills, their writing skills, and their fine motor and gross motor skills so that they can succeed in all areas of literacy. So after that little video, you would have heard that systematic synthetic phonics is probably a little bit different to how you were taught to read and write. It is explicit teaching. There is a systematic order to the sounds that are introduced, and students are taught to sound out and blend words to read. So our traditional phonics teaching, or our whole language phonics teaching, which is what we've done in previous years, was more about sight words and memorization and using picture cues to have a guess and repetitive patterns. And we really want students to actually be learning to read the sounds and the words and decode words so they can do that through all years of their schooling. Systematic phonics has been really effective for all students, even students with learning difficulties such as dyslexia, and teaching all students the same way is the best way to be inclusive as well. So our program that we've picked is called PLD. Their resources develop literacy across three core areas: literacy, oral language, and movement and motor. And it's been derived from the disciplines of education, occupational therapy, and speech therapy to provide a comprehensive program for students. It is a Western Australian program, so it is relevant to Australia and Australian sounds and Australian language and accents. It's also a highly award winning program and recognised by the Ausspelt and Dyslexia Foundations, which is really supportive of all students. And if it's implemented properly, which is what we're working towards, and we're all developing and learning how to do that the best way, we should see an increase in whole school literacy levels. It's not just phonics, so all students' literacy across Prep to 6 will be improved. So the first part of developing students' literacy that we've been focusing on is oral language. So oral language refers to the act of speaking and listening, and the main components for the oral language skill set include word knowledge, so vocabulary, sentence structure, language understanding, and structured thinking. So the ability to think of an idea and put that into writing and spoken sentences. So poor oral language doesn't necessarily prevent long-term success in primary school, but it will be really important for later in life, and also to improve the quality of students' language and written skills. So you might have heard the saying before: if they can't say it, they can't write it, which is why oral language is so important, and we are focusing on it a lot more in the junior school and foundation year this year. So confident speaking, listening skills, a wide range of vocabulary, and the ability to speak using correct grammar will set students up to move into developing written language. So there will be some resources attached to this session, and in there you'll find some notes that have some suggestions to do with student sound development and some ideas of things you can do at home to support student reading and oral language development. Some of the things in those resources will be some posters. So just like you can see on the screen here, students are being using these posters at school. They're being explicitly taught speaking, listening through short daily sessions, rather than them bringing in something from home and doing the traditional show and tell we've had in previous years. They'll be supported to complete short speaking, listening activities on different topics, and they'll follow clear structures. So the posters in the packs outline the sorts of information that students are expected to include, and these activities support students' vocabulary development, and which then in turn boosts reading and writing skills. So at home, you can support students by using these posters to prompt conversations after you complete activities, or even just after being to the shops. And you can see on screen an example of after completing a cooking activity, you can prompt your child, to explain what you just did, and use when did you do it, how did you do it, what did you use first, next, last, those sorts of key vocab to get them to explain in full sentences and practice those oral language skills, which will build their vocabulary. So the next component of literacy development is their movement and motor skills. So this is the way students organise their body and their muscles to respond to what they hear. And a physical response can often be required, whether that's to write or to move or to hold a book. They do need to have control of those gross motor and fine motor skills. So a range of physical skill development supports the functioning within a classroom, and things such as pencil grip, cutting skills, letter formation, and handwriting or all require different muscle groups and different motor skills. So you'll see in the resources again, there's some suggested things you can do at home and some sort of benchmarks of where students should be at based on age to support their movement and motor. And this is really important, especially after our COVID years, that students haven't been able to play sports as much, haven't been able to get outside as often, they haven't been running around at recess and lunch, getting exercise, climbing on the monkey bars. And so we really need to support this area of their development. So in the classroom, we are focusing a lot on fine motor skills, and students will be doing all sorts of activities that build these skills. So It's not just all pencil and paper. They will be, for them, it feels like playing because they'll have Play-Doh, they'll have kinetic sand, they'll have all sort of painting, all sorts of activities, but it is to develop those key skills. So at home and in your literacy information pack, you will find that there are some cues for letter formation. So you can see on the screen here with the S and the A and the T and the P, using verbal cues around back, around forward, around up, and down. We are using those consistently at school and getting students to say them as they're writing as well, so that they are always forming letters the same way. The other thing that's really important for writing is that they are prepared with holding their pencil correctly and sitting correctly in a chair. So can be tricky if they're a little bit on the shorter side, like for those that know me, I am too. But feet flat on the floor, back against the back of the chair, pulled in properly, and holding that pencil the correct way using those three fingers. There are some sheets in that information pack that explain some pencil grip things as well. And a good idea, it's a bit hard to grasp this over the camera, but using their pinky finger and their ring finger to hold a little marble or a pom pom or a dice or something or a Lego brick into their palm, that makes them keep those fingers out the way, and their three fingers, their thumb, their pointer finger, and their rude finger, I guess, can hold their pencil without those other fingers trying to grab around and get in the way. So that's a good little tip for home. Also in the information resources, you'll see there's a poster about B and D, which is quite common to get those confused and reversed. So that could be helpful to have up at home. And there's also some alphabet cards. Those cards have got the verbal cues, I think, on them to help you with your the letter formation. Anything you can do at home to get the students writing letters, writing cards, painting, drawing, using chalk, using texters. It's all going to help your students get that confidence holding a pencil and writing for school. So the last component is literacy. So this is their word attack, spelling, decoding skills. And we're going to talk a little bit about what phonemic awareness, so hearing sounds, and phonic knowledge, so actually knowing the names and the sounds that letters make. These are all important and they're central to our PLD approach. They also are the first steps to being able to comprehend and write and read accurately. So this is where the kids put it all together and can read, spell, and write. So, something you might have noticed is students coming home from school, they're talking a lot about the sounds that they're making, and they might even have some actions with them. So, the sounds are really crucial. We're not teaching students that the letter A is an A, it makes an at sound. We're focusing on those sounds first. And then once they know their sounds, they can use these to blend together. So, for instance, b, at, bat. And then they can do it to segment as well. So, bat is b, at, t, so pulling it back apart. So these skills are taught in short, sharp lessons in foundation 3 times a session, and in the junior school using flashcards. They're revised every day during the phonics block. This short demonstration is going to show you how those flashcards are used in the classroom and how you could easily practice this at home with some simple flashcards or alphabet drawn on cards. And you can even use them on tables, play games, word building, all that sort of stuff. Magnetic letters is another great way to do this. You'll notice that your kids should know actions to go with each sound. That's a really good physical way for them to remember. And the exaggeration of the mouth shape and the facial expression, which you'll see in the video too, is really important, so they know how to position their mouth to make the sound correctly. So I'm just going to play the video now. Just pay attention to some of those trickier letters too that we often get a bit confused with what sound they make, and the correct way to support your student to practice those.
Demonstration 1, just a basic set of flashcards are all you need. This is the S, T, whoops, P, E, N, N, D, E, K, O, G, L, F, say w, ooh, j, z, z. And again, the difficult sound that's sometimes pronounced as y, y. The tricky grapheme where there's two sounds, k, w, qu. And lastly, another tricky one, k, s, x, x. In terms of
So you'll see how some of those trickier sounds we're quite used to saying y or w. We're actually adding an sound after it. So we're saying two sounds together. So y and w. There's this initial sound that we really want students to hone in on. And also the other one is p and b. One is silent. It's just the air coming out for p. So p, whereas the b is voice, so we can hear that. So the students need to know that. So if we often say p, we're actually adding an afterwards. So that's something we're doing in the classroom with students every day. So any support and practice at home will be helpful for your children. All right. So the other big change that you'll notice when it comes to your students' literacy is their decodable readers. So decodable readers are books that align with the phonics teaching sequence that we are using at school. They only contain words made up of the sounds students know, and they have very basic high frequency words that students have been taught in the classroom. So in foundation, students will start their readers a bit later than in past years once they have mastered some initial sounds. And the junior school will also have decodable readers while they are still learning their sounds, but there may be some students who are no longer needing those because they do know all their sounds and are blending and segmenting confidently. So they will be on their traditional whole language readers. So whole language readers were a lot of repetition and a lot of patterns. So it might have been, I have a cat, I have a dog, I have a snake. So the kids were learning the pattern. They weren't actually learning to sound out the word and work out what the letters meant and represented in that story. And without the pictures, they would really struggle to read that book. Whereas a decodable reader, they should be able to sound out every single word in there, except for the obviously some of the high frequency words, and they should feel more confident and have more success to read it fluently and independently. So this will continue to support the students reading with their blending and progressing to reading fluently and comprehending what they're reading. So to start with, in foundation, students will get lots of games, lots of flashcards, lots of shared reading. We still want them reading books, even though they're not having to be the one responsible to do all the reading. So you reading to them, having discussions about stories, them listening to books, that is still going to build their literacy and their vocab skills, and that's still really important. Then repeated reading. You might read the page, they might read it back to you, or have a go at a couple of the keywords and sounding them out. That's the first steps. And once they're confident with that, then they'll begin taking home 2 to 3 decodable readers at the start of the week, and they will be at their level based on their sound. So even though at times they may feel like they're a bit easy and the kids are reading them fluently, hopefully they actually are on the right level, that and it's been identified they have a sound that they need to be practicing in that book that they're not showing correctly all other times. So reading those books will help them to be confident, to practice their fluency, and then you'll be able to talk about the book and the story and what happened and build their comprehension as well. So they do reread the book throughout the week, and we're about to watch a short video that explains the theory behind that. But they're also encouraged to read their own books from the library or from outside of school or online, and there will give you some resources to talk about, to find some online decodable readers as well as just fun reading that at all levels. So this is new. Our decodable library at school, it is very expensive to build up. We are slowly adding more and more books, but please be patient. There may be times students are reading the same book because they're like waiting for some more to come through. But repeated practice is really important as well. So this next little video will just explain why they're having the same book for the week and how important repeated reading is.
I'm going to talk about repeated reading. It's a technique used for early readers in which they are required to reread a reading book more than once. Now, why are we looking at this topic? To give parents and educators an understanding of the early reading process to make it as enjoyable as possible, because early reading is difficult for a lot of students. Now, let's first of all start with what actually happens with early readers. Typically, they enter a sounding out phase when presented with good quality reading books, in which every word is typically decoded. T, ed, ted, g, et, gets, t, et, ten, ed, red, p, et, pens, pens. In this phase, typically students fatigue really easily because that decoding is quite laborious. Now, over time, the texts get longer, and children should be hitting less fatigue, but also that decoding may still be happening on quite frequently. He, her, it, hit, the moon, ok, rock. And I think you're starting to get a sense of where I'm going to lead with this, of what the repeated reading technique provides. A little earlier on, however, as students leave that decoding phase, they hit a phase in reading, typically, in which students are reading whole words, but their reading is not fluent. And I'm exaggerating this, but students can read in this way: Tom got hot on top of the pot. Whole word disfluent reading. The text can be longer, and students may be doing a combination of the decoding as well as that lots of whole word reading without that nice flow. So why the technique of repeated reading? There have been many national literacy inquiries in which thousands and thousands of pieces of research on an international level have been investigated. All of those national literacy inquiries support the technique of repeated reading for our early literacy phase. Now, in repeated reading, typically what we're looking for is short text, 100 to 200 words, where students have an accuracy of around 95%. So first of all, what students need to learn is how to decode words, how to verbalize that text. And then now here comes the repeated reading phase and that repeated reading technique, and why it's so useful, because what we're going to get out of that repeated reading is reduced decoding. The more times I keep reading and rereading and rereading that text, each time you'll find when students are sounding out words less, they're recognizing more words. But the other byproduct of repeated reading is the flow, the automaticity, the fluency starts to emerge. And ultimately, what happens when fluency emerges and there's less decoding? Comprehension is maximized. But in
All right. So you would have seen that what's really important for you to do at home when you're reading with your students is to support them to sound out and blend each word, and then to practice rereading for fluency. And discussion about the books is so important as well. That builds their vocabulary and enhances their comprehension as well. So that brings us to the end of today. We thank you for listening. And if you did attend in person as well, well done. Thank you so much. As I said, there'll be some resources attached or sent out with this that give you a lot more information. And there's also some links to some websites and some games and some apps that you can use to support your children at home. The PLD program does have their own apps that can be purchased. They are really good to develop early sounds, so sort of the first initial sounds. So particularly for foundation students, they might be really useful. There are decodable readers online for free too. So if you're finding that you haven't not getting enough through school, that could be a good option. And as a school, we are looking at ways to get parents and families more access to decodable readers too. So please be patient; it's coming. And lastly, your local library website is a fantastic resource for online books and games and things to support literacy development. You just sign up with your library card, and through the main website, you can get a lot of access to different programs that would otherwise be paid for. So that's a really good place to start if you're wanting to get more support in literacy at home. So thank you so much for listening. If you do have any questions or concerns, or please speak to your classroom teachers or get in touch with me, Ellen Cake, and the or through the school email address, and they'll be sent on to me, and we can have a chat. So have a good day. Thank you for listening.